One of the more underrated characters in the Naruto franchise, Shino Aburame, specifically in part 1. Now, everybody has always thought they should have taken Shino against the Sound 4 in the Sasuke retrieval arc, with it becoming a joke even in the series throughout the entirety of Shippuden. Who would he be able to beat? We're going to talk about that and more today. Shino will take the place of each Konoha member against their fights in the Sound 4, so he's not running a gauntlet, he's just going to be taking their position in each of the fights. This includes environment and all. That being said, if you like Shino, you like Naruto, you like me, like and subscribe, and let's get into the video. Now, before we discuss the matchup, I just want to lay a little groundwork on where we can talk about Shino in reference to these characters, just so we have an idea and I don't have to explain things throughout the matchup. Shino already starts out the series with some pretty great lore, even with Kiba after seeing Gaara in the Forest of Death and Akamaru sniffing out his chakra levels, remarks how he wouldn't want to fight Shino even compared to the other people there, this also being after witnessing Sasuke's Lion Barrage and whatnot. Shino has a Gaara-like defense where the bugs inside his body are able to somewhat shield him from attacks, but the upper layers of this ability are unknown. We just see it in Shino's fight against Zaku, where he's able to blatantly tank Zaku's shockwaves, creating an armor or layering from his insects. It essentially makes it that he has a degree of durability, which is something that a lot of characters in Part 1 Naruto really lack. Also, his bugs blatantly blitz behind not only Zaku, but into the holes in his arms without him noticing. So his bugs actually do have some solid speed feats, but more so they're undetectable, which is really where the strength of them lies. Another example of this is how he could mark someone of Sasuke's speed in the Chunin Exam Arena. You could argue that he was able to put it on Sasuke while Sasuke was dashing around using Chidori, but this is more than likely when Sasuke was standing still after using Chidori, which is what the conversation does seem to imply, as he'd have no reason to mark Sasuke otherwise. And even if you argued he wanted to mark Sasuke for potentially a future matchup, it wouldn't make any sense since he was much closer to someone like Kankuro, who's going to face a lot more immediately. I mean, just look at it. He's standing right next to him. So I don't think it's that. I think it's when Sasuke was standing still. So yeah, they're impressive, but I don't think it was when Sasuke was dashing around. I think it was when he was standing still recovering. He's also able to beat Kankuro. Some people might call this fight a draw, but due to how Shino, for even the second half of the fight, was fighting while poisoned, it just should go to his W. As if he wasn't poisoned, it just would be considered his W. And considering he was able to heal himself after, it's he came out on the better end of that encounter. So he's able to out-chess and essentially beat Kankuro, who should be comparable to Temari. He's able to make insect clones, which really just benefit him. He shows an outstanding intellect in battle, underrated intelligence. And Shino should be around, I don't want to say the power level, but the tier of fighters from Konoha going to retrieve Sasuke, as even Naruto notes how Shino would have been a better pick than Choji, kind of implying he thinks Shino's skills are comparable to his own compared to Choji's, the gap would be much bigger. So Shino should be comparable to these characters going to fight the Sound 4 as well. He shouldn't really be behind them. Whereas Choji, someone who he's considered above, needs pills to amp himself. So I don't think he's getting blown out the water in terms of who he stacks up against either. Now, first up is Shino versus Jirobo. Now, interestingly enough, Jirobo and Shino are very similar in principle, with their techniques being aimed at absorbing the chakra of the other person, or in Shino's case, just eating it with his bugs. Jirobo has the weakest arsenal, quite frankly, when compared to the other Sound 4, being more of a brute who utilizes Earth Release. Now, I think out of all the Sound 4, Jirobo has the highest chance of losing the quickest due to the nature of his arsenal, meaning it should not be that hard for Shino to place a female bug on him or have his bugs maneuver around Jirobo. Now, the problem with Jirobo is that he has no resistances to Shino's bugs. So, for example, even if he goes into Curse March stage 1 or 2, it doesn't really make a difference. And his Earth Release isn't as isn't really omnidirectional or armor him or anything like that. It's really just basic Earth style techniques like walls and rocks being chucked, along with chakra absorption via his fist. So nothing Jirobo has is really outside the realm of possibility for Shino to deal with, whereas all Shino really has to do is stall till his bugs get into place. And the fact that Jirobo has to actually get close to Shino to absorb his chakra, and as he would be in character this fight, he's more than likely going to attempt to do so, even if he blows Shino back or beats him up a little bit, makes it that much more detrimental for Jirobo, meaning the minute he gets close to Shino, Shino's bugs are going to swarm him even from his body. And Shino's intellect is really going to serve him well in this fight. Shino being able to out-chess Kankuro, who is actually no slouch in intelligence, instantly recognizing Neji's powers and potential latent abilities, proceeding to just gather intel on him. So Kankuro's no slouch, and Shino's like kind of out-chessing him in their fight. Whereas, you know, all he really has to do is even just lure Jirobo into a false sense of security in this fight. So it's not so much that like Jirobo doesn't have these big overwhelming attacks or anything like that, but just due to how he is as a character and the fact that he's going to come up to Shino and just actually try and absorb him, even if he just beats him around the whole fight, is actually going to be his undoing. And the minute Shino's bugs latch onto him, he has no answer, no resistances. So unless Shino gets nuked by like giant boulders, like the cell that was originally about to be until Choji saved them, he should win this fight, especially if Jirobo just tries to like straight up, you know, one-on-one him with his fists as Jirobo does. And this gets even worse when you consider the fact that he's the weakest of the Sound Four. Now what that means, you know, generally in part 1 of Naruto, weakest generally refers to like all the stats. It could potentially mean an ability, but in this case, it could just mean like Jirobo's stats are the worst, along with his abilities being inferior to the other of the Sound Four, which is consistent. So even if Jirobo had higher stats per se, just due to the way he fights and the nature of it, Shino actually will get the chance to place his bugs on him, leading to an instant GG. And the fact that he's in Curse Mark Stage 2, or if he does enter the Curse Mark, would only expedite this process, as he's going to be more greedy and more willing to get close to Shino to end the fight a lot quicker, as they can't stay in the Curse Mark Stage 2 for very long. So Shino should clear this round just due to Jirobo's arsenal and the nature of it, and how he has to really get up and close to Shino and like hold on to him to absorb his chakra and all that. And due to his character and how he's actually going to want to play with Shino and absorb his chakra rather than just go for an absolute W. So Shino clears Jirobo. Next up, we have Shino versus Kidomaru. Now, this is probably the most controversial matchup, at least in my opinion, as both characters utilize insectoid-like attacks in their arsenals. Now, I believe Shino is going to be similar to Neji in this fight, in the fact that if he gets pinned by Kidomaru's chakra webbing, his bugs will eat the web since they have chakra circulating in them even after he spits them out. So that's not going to be too much of an issue for Shino, and especially since like the bugs are on his body. So it's not like he has to really throw out any techniques. The bugs are just going to pop out from him and start eating the webbing. I also see, due to the nature of how Kidomaru fights, is going to be a very game-like fashion. Even a reference by Orochimaru to be what is likely holding the group up, along with Jirobo's appetite. So I definitely see something akin to the Neji fight. Shino should be able to place a female on Kimimaru, even if he doesn't tag him in any way. The real question is, though, if Shino's bugs can actually eat through Kidomaru's spider sticky gold, which they're realistically not going to be able to do, as Kidomaru will be able to produce the metal anywhere on his bodies that the bugs are on, and while the bugs are on him, he'll just make the metal drop, or the metal like come off his skin, along with the bugs that were all over his body. And considering he uses this for quite literally all of his attacks, there really shouldn't be any issues with him producing it over and over and over throughout the fight. The only reason he didn't in the final little bit against Neji was because his body was paralyzed throughout the gentle fist. He was just kind of controlling where he was flying with his webbing. So the rate at which Kidomaru can actually produce this layering is also what should be noted, as he's able to produce it while Neji's like hitting him with the 64 palms before they tag his Tenketsu. So if he's able to throw it up before Neji, who's like touching him and like using his chakras kind of like the needle and like tagging his Tenketsu, if he's able to like erect it that quickly, or it's able to like take effect that quickly, he'll be able to react to Shino's bugs like coming over him. I don't think this is too questionable. And there's no real way to argue Shino's bugs would be able to eat through the material, as they're shown not eating through anything solid in the series like that, at least at this point, including Kankuro's crow puppet. So Shino's actual only viable win condition doesn't really work on Kidomaru, and while Shino does have a protective layer of bugs to eat attacks for him, Kidomaru would just eventually overwhelm him. We don't have a clear limit on Shino, but to say like his bugs are going to defend against like the piercing arrows that Kidomaru shoots out is ridiculous. And he will be able to overwhelm him, whether with his giant spider that was slowing Neji's movements down, who was only surviving due to his enhanced perception and him releasing chakra to slow attacks down. So imagine what he's going to be doing to Shino in this situation, who doesn't have nearly as many perception abilities and more so has like an unquantifiable like amount of damage he can tank. You know what I'm saying? You could make that argument, but how far can you really take it before you just kind of get outlandish? So I will say this too, Kidomaru's arrow is outside the realm of possibility for Shino to deal with. Shino has no way of dodging the arrow without enhanced perception abilities or the ability to emit his chakra in a wide range to steer the arrow off path, with Kidomaru firing a total of 3 arrows at Neji, each more precise than the last. He can actually just control it with his thread. It's ridiculous. Each of Kidomaru's arrows are allegedly lightning speed via the data book as well. So if you want to say they're closer to Sasuke's Shidorian speed, for example, this level of speed is far outside Shino's ability to react to as well. You might bring up that, you know, Shino might be able to like use his bugs to locate Kidomaru, and while this is all well and good, goes back to my initial point that A, this only works if like Shino takes a blow and like tanks one of the arrows, but B, it doesn't even secure anything because he can literally just form the layering when the bugs go on him. So this fight isn't really about if Shino can like locate Kidomaru, because I think that's perfectly fine. It's just that his win condition does not work. There's really no way to say like Shino's bugs will be able to tank the gold arrows. They don't really have any durability feats on that level. Even if he tanked minor blows from Kidomaru, you know, there's just no way to say that. It's like, imagine Shino at the bottom when all those spiders are dropping at him and he just shoots bugs up and is like, he's going to be getting slowed down as well, just getting everything shot at him, because Neji was getting slowed down astronomically. Even when he actually took out the giant spider, all of Kidomaru's like chakra webbing went on him. So not only is Shino going to be overwhelmed in this fight, but he's going to be getting slowed down progressively as well. So he doesn't really have anything he can do. So Shino's really not going to be able to do anything against Kidomaru. Kidomaru's arsenal is like a direct counter to Shino's, and Shino's one win condition doesn't really work against Kidomaru because he just detached the metal as it forms all over his body. He can use it repeatedly and just get the bugs off him and move to a new location. So Shino is not beating Kidomaru due to how Kidomaru is more of a direct counter. As well as the fact that Kidomaru is stronger than like the QB Amp Naruto that was fighting Neji in the Chunin exams. And it's like, okay, are Shino's raw stats like really at this point where he's like on par with Neji and like his combat speed and stuff like that? It doesn't really seem likely, you know what I'm saying? Even if I said like, you know, I said earlier like Shino's comparable, I think that's entirely fine. But to say he's on the level of Neji, you just be making a leapless jump. And Neji is implied to be the strongest of the group that went to retrieve Sasuke, like minus Naruto himself, as he's the only one that was actually able to take down his Sound 4 member without assistance or outside help. Like, he's actually the only one that won 1v1 legit. So yeah, Shino is just not Neji level. There's no narrative implication that Shino's as strong as well. Like, Neji is literally the narrative boss right next to Gaara. Like, everybody talks about it. So yeah, there's no real way to say like Shino would be able to perform as well. Next up, we have Shino versus Tayuya. Now, Tayuya is a weird type of fighter in the fact that she has her flute as her only weapon, controlling her summons, and Shino really shouldn't be getting blatantly overwhelmed here if Shikamaru isn't. You know, again, it's a weird comparison to make between Shikamaru and Shino's combat speed, but even if Shino does get hit, he does have a bit more luxury in this encounter to move around and gather intel due to his layering, especially with his insect clones that he can make. And I think this matchup is very similar to the Zaku and Kankuro matchup in the sense that Shino's real win condition is to clog the enemy's attachments. In this case, right, all Shino actually has to do is have his bugs clog up Tayuya's flute, which he's actually going to make note of very early on that she's using the flute to make summon. I think he'll be able to do this very quickly, making it so she can't control her golems or curse mark stage 2 genjutsu. So if Shino does accomplish this, the fight just ends since she'll get overwhelmed by his bugs, the forest arena only giving Shino more opportunity to scatter his bugs over the battlefield, just like his fight with Kankuro. And all Shino really has to do is not get overwhelmed by Tayuya's golems, which were not really able to overwhelm Shikamaru, who beat the other member of the Sound Trio. So if you go off the logic that Kankuro and Temari are somewhat relative, then Shino should also be able to perform these feats. It's really just discussing Shino versus Shikamaru in terms of like their combat speed. They really shouldn't be that far off in the series. Shino actually doesn't have to do this much work in the fight, as the minute Tayuya's flute gets clogged, she won't be able to control her golems or initiate her genjutsu, which is more than likely not affecting Shino since his bugs should be able to disrupt his chakra or cause him some sort of physical harm if Shikamaru can break the genjutsu by breaking his fingers. I've heard speculation that the bugs themselves would be completely unaffected by the genjutsu due to their anatomy, specifically in how their brains are much more different than mammals. But if you want more in-depth answers, scientists have found that more so singing insects like grasshoppers, crickets, and cicadas are the ones that actually have hearing. This is necessary because deaf beings can only make mute sounds. Singing insects need to hear to make the tunes that they do. Some butterflies and moths can hear too. But most insects actually don't even have ears. They depend upon their sense of smell to find any amount of food left, or they sense through the vibrations in the air, with the vibration sensor being in a different multitude of parts in their body, maybe the thorax, the wings, or the legs. So they're able to sense vibrations and don't process auditory sounds like humans do. How does this relate to Shino's insects? Well, Shino primarily uses beetles. He notes this and says this blatantly in the series. With there being about 350,000 known species of beetles, most of which are actually deaf. Yet some have developed ways to perceive sound through, lifetimes of evolution. So it is possible that Shino's beetles fall into one or a different category. But the moral of this is that insects really react to sound more so in reference to like the vibrations that are made. And that's very few insects. Beetles are among the many that actually can't hear through vibrations, at least most of them. So, it's more than likely the beetles are not even going to be affected by this genjutsu and are just going to be able to free Shino and attack Tsuyoya blatantly. And another supplementary point to all this is that Shino breaks himself out of Kabuto's Temple of Nirvana technique. That's like the genjutsu he did in the Chunin arena. We don't know, like maybe he released it before the genjutsu took effect, or it took effect and he broke himself out. Either way, the fact that he just didn't blatantly get overwhelmed by this genjutsu also does say something to his like genjutsu resistances. So just a side note. So Shino really is able to take down Tsuyoya. He's able to counter her one weapon, which is the actual flute. It's really weird that she even notes, like, she doesn't have kunai. She doesn't carry any of that, to the point where she goes and picks up Shikamaru's kunai. Like, it'd be different if I said, she goes in a curse mark version 2. She's able to whip out her kunai and maybe do something, but no, it's actually like she literally only has the flute. So once you take that out, she's really not going to be able to do anything. She's very similar to Kankuro, so Shino actually should be able to clear Tsuyoya. Next up, we have Shino versus Sakon. Now, I actually think this is going to be one of Shino's tougher fights against the alleged strongest of the Sound Forward via Orochimaru's assessment. And this is partly due to how just absolutely broken Sakon's ability is, which not too many people actually grasp. Due to Sakon's ability, that being the attack of the twin demons, which can be used in a multitude of ways, he's able to take no damage from a Lion's Barrage that an arguably stronger Sasuke than the one that forced Gaara to transform into Shukaku exerted on Sakon. And Sasuke was able to like force Gaara to transform into Shukaku just from like the physical force of his punches alone, which were fatiguing a much more bloodlusted Gaara. So Shino is going to get absolutely decimated if Sakon gets close. He's not going to be able to take the force of any of those punches, especially since they protrude multiple limbs to confuse the enemy on top of adding power to their attacks, evidenced with Sakon just destroying giant rocks by punching through them. And the way like his jutsu works, like multiple fists come out of his hand. He can block taijutsu with like legs protruding out of his body. He can do like multiple legs and like compound kicks. So Sakon can just swap hands with base Sasuke along with tanking like his ridiculous taijutsu. Some might say, well, Shino beat Kankuro and Kankuro beat Sakon. This doesn't work for a couple reasons, as A, the Sand Ninja are all implied to be stronger, with Gaara being outright stated so, all of them showcasing new abilities, with Kankuro having a new puppet, so he would be stronger than when he fought Shino. But also, Sakon had run a gauntlet at this point against the two Jonin returning from their mission, and against Kiba, knowing how he's almost out of chakra by the time he's about to take on Kankuro. And Ukon had taken over the body, with him blatantly stating, I'm not used to being the main body. So you can even make the case, like had Sakon been controlling the body, that play that Kankuro had made might not have gone down that way. So it's really just not a direct one-to-one in any capacity. And the reason I say Shino is more than likely getting dismantled is due to how Sakon can activate his curse mark and rush Shino down in this open area as they're going to be battling at the bottom of the river where Kiba fought him. As he was able to do just that and bully Curse Mark Stage 1 Sasuke, smacking him out of a blitz attempt, that would be like a weightless Lee base speed multiplied 2 through 5 times, and Sakon smacking that back. So Sakon's going to be ragdolling Shino if they get close. He's going to be much faster. As even if you said like Shino could perceive Sasuke's speed in the Chunin exam and his bugs could keep up, Sakon would be a multiplication on top of that. The Curse Mark would be a speed amp, obviously, as even the squad went running away from Sakon. When Sakon activated the Curse Mark, he was noted to have a speed increase, with the whole group noting how fast he was. So we do know his speed gets buffed by it. Sakon's shown also just confidently taking on base Naruto, who was a match for Sasuke prior, along with like surprise Fang over Fang attempts, with him just catching Fang over Fang too. So the problem with Shino is, on top of being definitively far slower and not having the ability to damage Sakon aside from his insects, right? So now that we established like physical blows are outside the realm of possibility, Sakon can actually just have Ukon separate from him if he's caught in Shino's bugs, and Ukon would just return and merge with Sakon, rejuvenating the chakra that was lost after. The rate of their separation being almost instant, displayed multiple times throughout the Sasuke retrieval arc. An example being when they smoked bombed the Sound 4 and thought they put them all in the Shout possession. Sakon, like in the span of like a panel, separates with Ukon, dismantling the attack. So they can actually separate very quickly. So if the bugs do begin to swarm them, they can separate. So the problem for Shino is, on top of this, is that if Sakon and Ukon separate, not only do you have two opponents who can go into Curse Mark Stage 2 to fight, and they can attach themselves to Shino as well using the Parasite Demon Demolition technique, which it's a little weird to discuss since bugs inhabit Shino's body, but due to the nature of the technique and how Ukon corrodes the cells of the person he merges with, I can't see the bugs making a difference unless they just begin eating all of Shino's chakra as a countermeasure, which doesn't matter if they eat Ukon's chakra as well, as Ukon could just revert back to Sakon after the fact and again regenerate. You know, that's the whole point of their dynamic. They take damage, they separate, they use up a lot of chakra, and then they come back together. So it's just a lot for Shino to deal with, and the fact that his main win con is questionable, and the fact that you have this fighter who's just going to be running him down with these hard-hitting taijutsu blows is going to be way too much. So Sakon's raw stats are far higher, and this doesn't even get into like any of his crazy stuff. He has like a Rashomon gate, which weirdly enough doesn't even matter in this matchup because Shino doesn't really have any moves like that. But if they do separate, they're both going to be in Curse Mark Stage 2 and just proceed to bully Shino. He's going to be dealing with two opponents of equivalent strength. So there's not going to be too much he can do. While I admit it's a little questionable, Ukon should be able to separate from Sakon if he does get caught in Shino's ball. So Sakon is just going to be beating Shino down with his high-speed taijutsu, multiple fists, multiple kicks, compounding, giving explosive physical force. Shino's taijutsu is going to get absolutely ragdoll, and he's going to beat down Shino. And if Shino does catch him, you know, it's even questionable. And the fact that Shino's win con is questionable is the problem. When it's not certain, that's kind of where Shino falters. So Shino is not clearing against Sakon and Ukon. Last one, we have the bonus round, that being Kimimaru. Now, I'm going to be quite frank, Shino's getting absolutely obliterated here. This is the guy who took a look at an ocean of QB Naruto clones around him, and whose exact words were just interesting. I guarantee you if I put Shino in that circle, he's not going to be finding it interesting. Kimimaru is really just a different beast. Even the weapons he uses will be more than enough to pierce through Shino. You know, his bones denser than steel. If for whatever reason Shino's bugs attach themselves to Kimimaru, which they wouldn't be able to since he'd actually be too fast, but let's say, you know, they did actually grab onto him, I could actually just see him running through them in his version 2 state, like he walked out of a giant sand burial and ran through Gaara's sand wall. He might actually just like walk through it. This is someone who actually did defeat Gaara, or would have beaten Gaara had his illness not come into play. Even Gaara himself blatantly admits this. Gaara's defensive having a lot better statements than any of Shino's, and Kimimaru just like running into Gaara is like breaking his sand armor down. Like he literally just tackles him and the armor breaks. So he might unironically just run into Shino and one-shot him. So, yeah, Shino's really not on that Kimimaru level. I think it'd be, like, disingenuous to say, like, oh, if he grabs him with his bugs and stuff, it's not going to happen. It really isn't. Kimimaru's hats are just, like, way too high. Unless you think, like, Shino's bugs or Shino himself is like QB Naruto level, which he's just not. And even then, like, Kimimaru is just absolutely like slapping that tier of fighter in base. So yeah, Shino really isn't gonna clear Kimimaru in any sense of the word. Kimimaru's honestly just gonna grab his spear, say chameleon dance, and proceed to just like bully Shino. So nah, Shino's not on Kimimaru's level. For anybody who's like gonna argue with Shino's bugs, the problem is like Shino's bugs have no, like, we don't have any real durability feats aside from Zaku's shockwaves for Shino's bugs. And even then, right, like, he actually does take damage from Zaku's shockwaves, just the bugs like kind of were like under his skin and came out, so they were protecting him. So to really like make that argument that he'd be able to tank some of these higher level attacks, you just can't, because there's no like real measure. There's no like defense or like durability feats for Shino at that point. And if these are characters who are like breaking through, like, for example, Gaara's defenses, like, there's no way to argue like Shino's defenses, which haven't been noted, are really gonna be able to do anything. That's the video. Let me know if you guys agree, disagree, why, down below, who you think Shino beats. I'm very interested to hear your guys' thoughts.
Yeah, let's say out of the 4, I think he did run it right, but you know, He definitely beat 3 out of the 4. That last dude, he just wasn't fucking with. Nah, because technically those twins are fucking a problem. Yeah, I agree with him. Good video. Shout out to